Well, where to begin? Maitri asked me to talk about any subject that I felt like talking about, but community building was mentioned as one of the possibilities, and that's one of my favorite subjects. So I'm going to try to launch in that direction. Just yesterday, I finished teaching a 55-hour module of spiritual counseling that took place over a number of Saturdays. It ended yesterday, and it's accredited also for those getting credits for yoga teacher training level 2. So it's for people who want that, but also people who just want to study spiritual counseling and have it in their back pocket for helping friends and understanding the principles. Actually, before I go on, I want to say that my laptop, my little laptop is right there, but my big screen is right there. So if it feels like I'm looking at you sideways, it's because I can see you better on the big screen. So please forgive. So the reason I brought up spiritual counseling is that I used during the course probably easily a dozen or more of Swami Kriyananda's books. And I use them as resources because I approach the subject with how do we bring ourselves into balance? And the teachings are so rich with examples of that, points to that. The Bhagavad Gita, Yogananda's commentaries on the Gita are incredible for bringing us into the spine, into alignment. But really all the, Patanjali, the Raja Yoga course, all the different offerings that we have show us what it looks like to be centered and in alignment. And when we go out of alignment is when we become unhappy and imbalanced. And that's when we usually go and talk to somebody, a friend or somebody we trust spiritually, to try to figure out how to get back into balance. And I say this because Maitri and I hearken back, as she mentioned, to the years we worked together at Crystal Clarity in California at the main community at the village. And it's those years gave me a very deep appreciation for Master's writings, Swamiji's writings, because when I say Master, I'm referring to Paramahansa Yogananda if this is on Facebook. But because I'm not actually a big reader, and I'm not sure I would have read them all as carefully as I ended up having to read them because I was the publisher. And Swami Kriyananda would send me his, manuscripts, not even when they were finished only, but pages at a time, chapters at a time. And then he would call me constantly to ask for my thoughts about it. So not because I think he necessarily cared about my thoughts about it, but he wanted me to read it, and he wanted me to get inside of it and attune myself to it. I think he was making me ready for the work we're doing now. So I'm saying all that because we just have such a very, very rich body of teaching. And, you know, by the grace of God, books, audios, videos that Maitri helped to make in the early days, but, you know, so much available to keep studying, to keep reading, to keep rereading, because every time we do, our karma has changed since the last time we read it. And as a result, we see it and hear it a little differently, a little more deeply, typically. I find myself still to this day, you know, I've probably given the talks at Sunday service on every subject in the chapters of Rays of the One Light, you know, 30 times or more sometimes. And yet every time I read it, I read some of the nuance the last time. And it allows me to give a completely and new approach to the topic. So I say all of that because there's two aspects to community building. One is to bring people who are already acquainted with Yogananda's teachings more deeply into those teachings by studying them and meditating on them and listening to the talks about them and so on. So that's a very big part of the work that we all have to do together. The other part is reaching out to people who have not yet heard about these teachings and to try to plant seeds and be of service to them. So when Riemann and I were asked to come to Seattle, we understood instinctively that each of these bodies of souls, the ones wanting to go deeper and the ones who don't know us yet, in order to reach them and serve them, it requires a different mindset, thinking a little differently about how to do that. And we were blessed as a couple. Riemann you all met him when he came out last year. He's really remarkable at, teaching the courses, the Raja, the Gita, the scriptures, all of those courses. He's a jnana yogi, he can explain them to people in a way that makes them understandable. So he's wonderful for reaching out to people who do not know us and bridging the gap of meaning to them. My own inclination was more to work with the people who already know these teachings to some degree and to help bring them deeper. And what we observed when we got here to Seattle was that we needed to first build the core, really concentrate on that more energetically and go deeper and help bring people to Kriya and help Kriya bonds to go further and more in depth. And needed that stronger core with which we could then reach out further to people we don't yet know. But it's never either or. Swami Kriyananda's always taught us that it's both and. It's just where we were putting the emphasis and how much time we spent on each, but we were always doing both. You've probably all heard the story where in the early years at Ananda Village, finances were tough as they usually were. And there was a meeting in which it was discussed whether we should maybe consider closing the retreat facility for the winter months, because there's so few guests in the winter months, and it's expensive to maintain the staff and, you know, all the overhead and expenses. And when Swami Kriyananda heard about that, he said, absolutely not. The guest is God. We always have to have our door open for anyone who wants to come. And so, you know, that was tough. That was a difficult thing to do when finances were so tight, but it's an important principle. And so, you know, it looks to me as if your group is large enough that there are going to be some people who are better at reaching new people, others who are perhaps better at helping those already familiar go deeper with their practices and with their understanding of the philosophy, their attunement to Yogananda and these teachings. You all know each other. You'll have to sort all of that out, but it's just one suggestion that I'd like to offer that we found worked incredibly well and still works incredibly well to this day. We've been here 27 years. There's another aspect, which is, you know, we're in the middle of this whole COVID thing. And I heard, I think I read that you all had to give up your rented facility. All of the Ananda centers, meditation groups who had them, as far as I understand it, have had to do so. In fact, it wasn't sustainable to keep paying those rents. And so we're in a whole new paradigm. How do we reach people? How do we build the core when we can't even meet and visit with each other and see each other? I am delighted to see that you all have this Zoom thing going. I don't know if you do it every single Sunday, but if not, I hope you do. And that it's also on Facebook, which is a great way to reach other people, new people, people from all over the country for that matter, but it's nice if they can also be local, so eventually you can meet each other. So consciously putting your investment into ways to broaden your online offerings. We had a member who donated 2 very expensive, high quality video cameras so that we could have one at our temple and one that stays mostly with Riemann and I. In our home, we have a young man who's a fabulous, you know, what do you call him, video person. And he comes and he uses that camera, and we have a lot of online stuff that we do, the 2 of us do. So we don't have to go to the temple every time to do it. Even if you just have one, I mean, one is plenty sufficient, but high quality so that you can do more and more online programming for people. And of course, I'm sure you're also taking advantage of the online programming that Ananda worldwide everywhere is offering right now. So if you don't have enough staff and resources, They can watch Jyotishan Devi and Dhyana in Italy and India rather, and so on and so forth. But I have to say, our experience out in the cities is that people like to see a familiar face. So if they know you, or if they know that you're there, accessible to them in Dallas, they're more likely to watch your local programming, at least some of the time, than they are, you know, from other Ananda places. But it's, again, it's a both and, you know, they can do that. And lastly, before I open it up to discussion, in the period leading up to Swami Kriyananda's passing in 2013, he was encouraging all the Ananda communities to get farmland and to be able to grow our own food. And definitely, he's all of his adult life. I knew him for, you know, this is my 50th year on this path. And for as long as I can remember, he always talked about getting ready for difficult times ahead that Yogananda warned about. But it was also because farming and growing food and such is it's just a very wholesome spiritual activity. You know, being outdoors in the fresh air, you know, growing things. It's a lovely thing that devotees can do together. So ours happened to be the first colony that went out and purchased some farmland about an hour north of Seattle on Camano Island. And as we were in the process of purchasing it, we had no idea who would run it. Most of us at the time, you know, actually we purchased ours just before Swami Kriyananda started more openly talking about it. So it's been at least 8 years. And there were a whole lot of people like me, let's say in the retirement age bracket, you know, older folks. And it was like we would look around the room and say, well, who's going to actually do the farming, you know, and bend over and do all of that planting and harvesting. And as we were in the process of finding the investors to purchase some farmland, this young couple appeared, out of nowhere. No such thing. A coincidence is God choosing to remain anonymous. Anyway, this young couple appeared who, also happened to be very in tune, very sincere, very deep spiritual souls. And they said, well, we'll farm it. And so they started off out there. For the first year and a half, they were out there alone, but we would have work days, and the rest of the Sangha would go there to help on work days. We had found investors, so we didn't have the pressure of needing to generate a certain amount of income right away to pay a mortgage. You know, it all sort of fit together really well. It like an old worn shoe, you know. And so anyway, it got going. Now there's about more than a dozen, maybe 14, 15 people who live at the farm, ashram style. they're growing food, they're going to farmers markets, they have farm suppers, farm to table type suppers, and they are meeting people from all over who just love what they're doing and love the farm, and many are ending up in the Raja Yoga course or the meditation courses, even though it's an hour away from where the farm actually is. What I'm saying is that if you can't get a rented facility in the cities right now because it's not safe and people can't gather, and honestly, it's all conjecture, but my personal observation is I think it's going to be a while before that changes, until there's a safe vaccine, and that can take years to have a really safe vaccine that's been tested. So all that to say is we have a new paradigm, and actually I think personally purchasing land, and it doesn't have to be a lot. Our first parcel was 10 acres with a manufactured home on it, but we were able to get started, and it was very reasonably priced. And so we got going, but it had a building, the farmers, as we like to call them, the devotees could live there, and people could visit there, and we could have gatherings there, socially distanced, no problem. There's plenty of space, masks on. If you're outdoors, at least in our state, if you're outdoors and socially distanced, you don't have to wear the mask. But all that to say is people can still get together and serve. They have retreats, they have yoga classes on their deck that they also Zoom and live stream. They lead meditations. They offer yoga classes in town where our rate of infection is so low that they're able to, and they're allowed to. We're in phase 3 already, in the area where the farm is. So I'm just saying that that's something that I think can be done in these times, and something for you all to maybe consider. I'm sure you have. I'm just here to tell you it works. So I'm just going to say that something I learned from Swami Kriyananda is there's no such thing as standing still. You're moving forward or backward. So act on it.